Welcome to the Agape Purpose Podcast, where we highlight the stories behind the mission. Today, we are joined by a very special man, a man basically who runs this place, let's be honest. Greg Haman, our director of flight ops. How are you, Greg?
Doing good. I don't know if I agree with all that.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have
You're
Agape
too
Flights. We wouldn't have Agape Flights without all the work you put in for us.
Yeah. Well, it is a lot of work, but it definitely takes a team, and it's 100% a team effort, and I'm not just saying that flippantly. So there ain't no such thing as a one-man show.
No, I mean, that's fair. So let's talk about the beginnings. What brought you to Agape Flights? Tell that story a little bit.
Yeah. My goodness, how long do we have?
You have as long as you want.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio, so that's the true birthplace of aviation. And so in more ways than one, I think aviation's always been in my blood. And so from the time as early as I can remember, I was fascinated with airplanes. As a little kid, all I ever wanted to do was be a pilot. And so, like I said, aviation is truly in my blood. And then as I grew up, I grew up in a good Christian home. My parents both loved the Lord, and we were always in church. And so as I grew up and I started to get exposure to ministry and missions through my church, I learned about Nate Saint and read the story Tip of the Spear or the book, Three Gates of Splendor.
The Elliot story.
Yeah. I read the book and then watched the movie. I
Yes,
always get the two mixed up, but yes and yes. And so kind of slowly opened up my exposure to missions aviation. At the time, it was kind of I think I saw it almost as like a novelty, like, oh, that's a really cool thing. But I never really, and this is talking as like a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid. I don't think at that time I ever really related it as to being for me. But God was obviously still doing a lot to direct my path. And so ultimately I had full plans to go to college, become a pilot, and go the airline track. Ended up having an opportunity to get my airframe and power plant license to be a mechanic in high school. Wow. So half the day was high school, half the day for several years in high school was my A&P program. And then when I turned 18, I was able to test out and get my airframe and power plant license. And it all worked out that while I was doing that, I had a lot of jobs. I was a lifeguard. I was a server at a country
Typical
club.
Midwest kid.
Yeah, lifeguard in the summers. But I guess it would have been, maybe my junior year, I had an opportunity to detail and clean corporate jets at Dayton International. And so it was a small corporate outfit. We had four private jets, 3 that we chartered out. And while I was working there, I got a really good rapport with the team there. And so as soon as I finished my senior year and tested out with my A&P, the director of maintenance called me in and said, "Hey, I want to offer you a job." And he showed me the bottom line, and I was like, "I'll put college on hold." And even better, they actually had a program by which, as long as I maintained a B average, they would actually pay for college. Now I couldn't go to Michigan East. I was originally planning to go to Eastern Michigan University.
I thought you were about to say you were going to go to Michigan University.
You kidding me?
That's why I was worried.
Yeah. No, I'm born and raised in Ohio. I'm an Ohio State boy through and through. Ain't none of that. But no, I originally had plans to go to Eastern Michigan University through their flight program to become a pilot. And like I said, got hired there at it was called Corporate Flight Alternatives was the company. Ended up getting hired there as a mechanic, and so still went to community college while I was going there, and it was a really good deal. And then throughout all that, the church I was attending at the time there in Tip City, Ohio, they were a very, very missions-oriented church, had mission trips all over the world, had a missions pamphlet that they generated each year. So literally a pamphlet of like, here you go, these are the mission trips we're offering this year. So, maybe a couple dozen any given year. So a pretty incredible opportunity. And I've always been attracted to kind of the Caribbean and like the tropical. Again, for a Midwesterner, it's like it's very novel, right? It's like, oh, that looks really pretty and blue and sunny. That sounds great. So I ended up falling on a week and a half trip in Haiti. I didn't know anything about Haiti at the time, just knew that I was being called to do something, when they made their missions kind of push, at the beginning of the year. So I signed up for the Haiti trip and ended up going to Haiti for a week and a half. And it totally changed my life. It changed my life, wrecked my life. It, turned my life upside down, just basically. And so did several trips to Haiti after that, before I ever even got involved in missions aviation. So really had a heart and a passion for the people of Haiti, for the country, for the culture. Just wanting to be able to serve the underserved, which there's a lot of underserved in Haiti if you haven't heard. And so I was just trying to figure out what that looked like in my life. how I could become more involved than just, supporting, financially and going on periodic week and a half long mission trips. During that whole time, there was an organization called MMS, that's Missionary Maintenance Services in Coshocton, Ohio. And they're a really unique ministry. They actually take in aircraft that have been damaged out in the field for a lot of other mission organizations. So say you have an airplane that ran off the end of a runway in Uganda and crashed in, the front of the airplane, but it's not a total loss, or it doesn't have to be. But that organization maybe doesn't have the resources to do the repairs in the middle of nowhere, Uganda. And that's just a total, for instance. There might not be any mission aviation Uganda. I don't know. So don't take that as rote.
Yeah.
But so what they would do is they would disassemble it, put it in a sea container, send it back to little old Coshocton, Ohio. And then they would take as long as it took to literally rebuild it from the ground up. And then same thing, then they would send it back and put it back into service. And they're 100%, supported, ministry, missionaries, mechanics that were working there. And so that was about 2.5 hours from where I was. And so I ended up on my days off, and I did swing shifts. So I had a lot of Mondays and Fridays off. I would drive over to Coshocton, Ohio, and I would volunteer there. And that really opened up my exposure to missions aviation. And it was actually through MMS that I originally got connected with Agape. Came down, they sent out a response team to help out with, we had a King Air at the time. So I was part of a response team from MMS as a volunteer, came down to Agape. And through that, realized that Agape needed a mechanic, and just, I guess I could go on and on, but one thing led to another. God made it very clear that I was being called that direction. And so, ended up leaving that side, leaving the for-profit side of aviation, and joined Agape. That was originally made the commitment 2009, got here beginning of 2010 on the ground full-time. And the rest is history.
So I just love hearing your story, because it just shows like you are literally a person who is full throttle, pedal to the metal, like, hey, this is what God's called me to. I'm going to answer the call and follow forward with it. So like, what brought you from coming here as a mechanic to now our director of flight ops? How did that story unfold?
Yeah. Again, how much time do we have? Yeah. So when I was in Ohio, I started my flight training in Ohio before I made the commitment and came to Agape, because I still had the desire to ultimately, one day get my commercial pilot licensing. And, I had a really good thing going as a mechanic there, working on the jets. And so at the time, I think I kind of came to terms like, maybe I won't be a full-time commercial pilot, but I'd still like to get all my ratings and keep that door open. So I started working on my private pilot's license in Ohio, and then got called to come into ministry and go to Agape. And so I had to put that on hold for a couple of years, just financially. When you're raising support and going through that process, it wasn't really very attainable at the time. And I was so busy, I was underwater when I first got here, just trying to figure out a new organization, and there wasn't exactly a whole lot of direction at the time, and what my role. I knew what my role entailed, keep the airplane legal and safe and in operation, but I didn't know what all that looked like at the time. So all I'd say, I was kind of underwater the first year or two anyways, just trying to figure out my role at Agape. But once I got past that, ended up joining a flight club, finished my private pilot's license. And around that time, I also met my wife, Sierra, and we got married in 2013. Yeah, that's a date. Even as I'm saying, like, don't butcher this one.
Yeah, no, good job.
Yeah, I got married June 1st, 2013. So I have an anniversary coming up.
Oh,
yes,
nice.
I remembered.
Good. Sierra, he remembered.
Yeah. But so I ended up getting involved in a flight club, finished my private pilot's license, and then we had the opportunity to actually buy an airplane that was in pieces. It had been parted out and was essentially on salvage, but everything was there. So we had the opportunity to buy that for pennies on the dollar. So we sold our share in the flight club, bought that. It was a 1976 Cessna Cardinal fixed gear. And so I had the idea of like, okay, I'll do this. I'll finish up my commercial and my instrument and all, go through the different ratings in this airplane, a little more capable than the 172 in that flight club. And so we did that, and got my instrument. Ultimately had the opportunity to get my commercial, and a longtime supporter and volunteer of Agape. He had a small twin that I was able to get my multi-commercial in. So I took care of that for a period of time for him on the side, and then used it, basically just put fuel in it and maintained it and flew that, and did the multi portion of that. And next thing you know, it's 2015, 2016. I got somewhere in there. I think it was 2016 when I actually finished my multi commercial. And then from there, started flying right seat for Agape. And again, the rest is history. Fast forward however many years later and however many thousands of hours. And, and then I think as far as how did I get to be director of flight operations, some of that was just by attrition. Individuals leave and there's a role that needs to be filled. There's a gap in operations that has to be filled. And, I can't say that I always stepped up willingly to the plate. Sometimes it was like, hey, we need you to do this. But, I think with the Lord's direction and help, I've tried to answer the call as best I could over the years. And here we are in 2025.
So again, I want to go back to just how driven you are is like every day, like I see you come in, you're dedicated, you are here, the last person to leave here every day. Why are you doing that? Like, why?
Because there's a mission that needs to be accomplished and somebody has to do it. And the truth is I still feel very called to what we do here at Agape. I worked for 5 years on the other side of things and I had a great job and I love the people I worked with when I was in corporate aviation. But I got to see that side and it wasn't that it was bad.
Yeah.
It was just that in terms of eternal kingdom impact, I'm not saying that I'll be in ministry to the day I die. I think all of us are called to ministry in some form, as long as we're on this earth. I mean, that's the whole idea of the Great Commission. But, I'd be lying if I said I was going to be in this role, in this position till, the day I retire. Maybe I will be. But going back to your question, there is a mission that has to be accomplished. There are hundreds of missionary families that are relying on us. And behind them, there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands potentially of people that they serve that are relying on the medications, the supplies, the things that we're taking in on a biweekly basis. And so, if I don't step up to the plate, I don't want to make it me-centric because God is so much bigger. And if I fell over dead today, I have full confidence that somebody else would miraculously come along and was like, hey, I'm the next man up, so to speak, or maybe the next woman up, it could very well be it. I have no delusions to that end, but in this place and time, I'm the one up to bat. And so I just want to swing as hard as I can, as best I can. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah. I just love hearing, getting to sit down with everyone, hearing their why behind the mission for them. So like hearing your why, could you expand on like a story that, helps push you sometimes when you're struggling? Like, let's be real. Not every day we wake up and we're like, I'm ready to do this.
Yeah.
What is a story that kind of helps you to do that? We're being real here.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stories like that. I've actually thought about that quite a bit. Because a lot of times like something will happen on a flight and it'll remind me of like, oh, this one time was so-and-so, John Ruman and whatever, which, he passed away, unfortunately, years ago, one of our missionaries in Lakai. But I think one story I do continually come back to anytime I'm asked that question, it was Hurricane Matthew, and that was the first major. So again, I get confused 15, 16 when that was, but I remember it was Hurricane Matthew. That was my first major natural disaster that I had been a part of as an Agape pilot. Unfortunately, there's been quite a few since. Quick little segue. People ask me is like, how long have you been here? And I actually have to, I measure seasons of life and I measure in terms of natural disasters. I think some of it's a nature of what I do here at Agape. And I think some of it's the nature of living in Florida. It's like,
1000%.
Which hurricane was that? Which earthquake was that? Again, that's maybe a kind of an odd, morbid way to look at things. But going back to your question, so Hurricane Matthew going into Jeremy, Haiti, which at the time, Jeremy, it was just literally a strip of dirt. Now they've done a lot with it over the years. They've paved it and graded it and actually put up an actual fence around the airport. It's a nice little airport, by any standards, certainly by Haitian standards. But at the time, it was, we used to do a pass or two over the airfield just to get, there'd be kids out there playing soccer. There'd be, people would have their laundry out there drying in the sun. There'd be, cattle grazing. I mean, so yes, like that used to be Jeremy, Haiti, the airstrip there. And so it was during that time and like they get a good rain and the whole thing is just a mud pit. I mean, it's just, you pull off to the side of the runway into the parking area. And it was a slop fest. I remember, between United Nations and everything else there. But Going back to the story at hand, I remember, and I believe it was one of our missionaries there. I think it was Mark Stockland, but Mark, if you're watching this and it wasn't you, like I said, don't hold it against me. But I think it was Mark Stockland, Haiti Bible Mission. But I remember them pulling up with a pickup truck, and as we're offloading this stuff, and I remember just so vividly, hearing him say, you have no idea, like within the hour, this, and at the time, food was in desperate, it was a critical food situation, just because people had lost everything in the hurricane. And so the very basics of life, rice, beans, cooking oil. I remember him saying, like, within the hour, this is going to be feeding hundreds of people that otherwise are starving. And it was just a very, and this is in the commotion of, like I said, you have UN helicopters and aircraft landing. I mean, it was like something out of a movie almost. And here we are, little old Agape flights, little old me. But yeah, just you have no idea like what this is going to mean to people. Literally, this is the only meal they might get for days that they're going to be eating in the next hour with what you're delivering. And so I think it really portrayed to me the critical nature of what we bring in and what we do and how we kind of fit into that role in God's kingdom and what he's doing down there.
That's so beautiful. I just, hearing your stories, like, and listen, we could sit here for 4 hours listening to Greg's stories because every flight, I feel like you have a different story you can tell about that. But like with Bruce, I kind of asked him a question. I was like, what are some of the struggles you have to deal with? And he responded, hey, sometimes I have to prioritize what goes on these flights and stuff. What are some of those things that you have to struggle with when you're on these flights? Like what is something you have to struggle with when you're in the field? Yeah,
actually, in terms of like during the flight,
yeah.
A lot of times I don't know what the struggle is going to be until it gets there. I guess you could say that to anything in life.
Yeah.
Some things, like if you have weather systems and weather patterns that you're going to have to contend with. Obviously, some of that ahead of time before the flight, and so you try to plan as best you can. Like, okay, the weather's going to be there at this time of day. I know I have to be in there by this time, otherwise my weather window might shrink and dwindle. And it's not like just picking up and flying to the other side of Florida or up to Georgia. I mean, like you're traveling hundreds of miles. The whole circuit's thousands of miles down, back, and bouncing around the island. And so, you have to really try to forecast as much as you can. But sometimes you get down there and there might be a customs issue that, you get hung up with customs or something that they don't like. And so they squabble for 20 minutes over what they're going to do with it. And then they decide to let whatever that item is, they decide it's going to be okay after all. And now your weather window is shrunk and now you have weather that's moved in and now you have to make hard decisions. Okay. Can I get into there? If I can't get into there, is there an alternate that I can get into? And most of the airports in Haiti, they don't have any kind of what we call instrument procedures. So even if it's bad weather, it's not like, I'll just shoot the RNAV or the ILS or, these are, instrument procedure in aviation. A lot of times there's none of that. So you have terrain and, a lot of these airports are surrounded by terrain and they're VFR only, which is visual flight rules. So AKA good weather conditions. And you got weather systems moving in. And so now, again, you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to try to get in. This is my plan to try to get in safely. If I can't get in with a reasonable margin of safety, whether it be, in terms of the ceiling I'm going to go down to, the weather I got to drive around, then do I have an alternate? Where else can I go? And a lot of times there's other airports that I might be able to go to, but I can't necessarily drop off cargo there because the missionaries can't get there because of the situation in Haiti, whether it be the roads or the lack thereof or the political, whatever the situation might be. Just because I can drop my load off at an alternate, it doesn't mean that the missionaries that need it can get there. And so there's so many levels and so many dynamics that you have to think about as you're going throughout the day and decisions you have to make sometimes on the fly, quite literally.
You're not just up there flying like, oh, this is a great flight.
Yeah.
You're constantly, I've seen it. Like you have your iPad, you're looking at the weather in one hand, you're making sure you have all the right codes, you're calling to make sure that, hey, we have clearance to land here. Like it is a nonstop procedure for how many hours would you say one of your circuits is?
Yeah. I mean, a typical day trip's 13, 14 hour duty day.
So you're on the clock 14 hours sometimes, just nonstop. And, you have the guy right next to it, but at the end of the day, it's on you because being the pilot, being the captain.
Yeah, what we call the PIC.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and it's always a crew mentality, I mean, and I tell all my guys that whether you're sitting PIC, which is pilot in command, or SSE, second in command, pilot, co-pilot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a crew
That's for
effort.
us
It's
dum-dums.
we
get it. We get it.
yeah. No, it's totally it's
Yeah.
it's a crew effort, just like in any professional aviation outfit. So we talk. There's dialogue and discourse between us, and we come to a decision mutually. Sometimes there are decisions where you, as the captain, as the PIC, you have to make, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to go for it. But it's typically we're in that environment. It's not a dictatorship. It's like, hey, what do you think? Like, like you're looking for input, even as the captain, like you need that input because, at the end of the day, Greg Haman often doesn't have the right answers. And so, or maybe I have a part of the right answer, but I'm missing that piece. And so that's why I rely so heavily, on that crew environment.
So brag about your crew. Tell me, like, what does your crew mean to you, basically?
Oh, they're everything. I mean, it's like, so we have to have 2 pilots are required for both aircraft. In the one airplane, legally it's required. But in both aircraft, from an insurance standpoint, we're mandated to have 2 crew, a pilot and a co-pilot, a PIC and an SIC on every trip. And right now, unfortunately, just the way it is, we desperately need additional staff pilots to come alongside, but the Lord hasn't brought those individuals here as of yet. Maybe one of them is watching right now. Yes, we have 2 open positions, a pilot mechanic position and a pilot cargo assistant position that we desperately would like to fill. So if you're watching this right now and you feel the Lord calling,
plug it away.
Yeah. This is my recruitment right now. Please, we desperately need additional staff help. But all I'd say, so all the other pilots that we rely on, apart from myself on staff, are all on a volunteer basis, which I think to me makes their commitment even more impressive because, I mean, they have lives, they have full-time jobs, they have things that they have to reschedule their whole life around those other things so that they can dedicate that, 1 day a month, 2 days a month, sometimes even 3 days a month, depending on the month and the routes. To sit in the other seat and fly with me or and it's not, sometimes I'm not even on every flight. Sometimes I get some flights where it's 2 volunteer crew, where I can actually hang behind and get caught up, or if I have vacation or something like that. So all I'd say, without you ask what our crews mean to us, everything, because without them, we don't fly. I can't fly the ship myself, either one of them.
I think it's just so incredible looking at your crew as like, you got the Paul Fights, you got the Corey, you got the Jeff Yanisellos, you got all these people who have so much other commitments in their lives. And I'm missing other people, Doug, all your people, but like they have so much commitments in their life, but they're willing to dedicate a 14-hour day. And you just said it, a very, very hard 14-hour day.
Yeah, multiple times a month.
That is so incredible. That just shows what the impact of the kingdom means to them.
Yeah. Yeah. For them, they're absolutely in it to win it. And I think once you do a flight and you see what some of the because some flights they're a joy and they're fun, and like sometimes things are just like boom, smooth than I can even possibly imagine. But for every one of those flights, there's probably 2 flights to where it's like there's something. You never know what it's going to be. And so for those guys, I know they are 100% in it to win it for the kingdom and for the ministry and the mission that God has called Agape to. Because if they weren't, they wouldn't stick around.
That's 100%. I wouldn't stick around if you weren't called 14 hours.
Yeah.
And like, let's be real, like it's hot in Haiti. So like you're unloading all this cargo, you're making sure everything's done correctly because, there's just so much effort behind it. What are some misconceptions that you think people have about what you guys do in the flight ops department that you want to clear up?
Yeah, and it's beyond flight ops. I think probably the biggest misconception, just somebody walks in off the street, like, what is Agape? And you start describing to them what you are and what we do. And it's like, oh, so you're a freight forwarding service. You're like a FedEx, a UPS, or an Amazon. And that's probably the most common. And yes, there are a lot of parallels to what we do. But for one, they're for profit and, they have an operating spec. So essentially they're an airline, charter, whereas we're private. But yeah, I mean, outside of the fact that we all move supplies and cargo, that's where really the separation begins because, they're for-profit entities and, at the end of the day, they have shareholders. And if they're not profitable and meeting bottom lines, then there's going to be issues. Whereas with us, the more we fly, the more money we lose. And that's what I tell people. And for people that are coming in off the street that have that conception of us as like a FedEx or UPS, like, that's just like, well, what do you mean? The more it's like, we have to, for every pound of cargo, for every dollar we spend, we have to subsidize the difference. So, because we only bill for a fraction of the true cost of what it costs to get these supplies down there. And that's where the ministry comes in. That's to where it's like, hey, we're not in it to make money. I know some people are probably looking, it's like, well, you still have a per pound rate. So, yeah, but it's minuscule compared to the true cost to operate these aircraft and keep this place in operation.
Do you have the exact number that you think that it would be? Because right now we charge $450. What would be that number, like a FedEx or something would charge per
pound?
I
mean, if they're going to be profitable and operate in the kind of environments that we operate, it'd probably be upwards of $10 a pound.
I've always wondered that.
It's going to be a little different in Haiti versus Dominican. There are a lot of services there, and so the more services you get, the it's supply and demand, and the more you do it and the higher volume, the cheaper it gets. But for how we operate and where we operate, there are no FedExes or UPSs or anymore, no DHLs. There is nothing else going into Haiti really, in terms of cargo and logistics, not by air anyways. By sea, you can still get some stuff in. They do get stuff in, but even that, with Port-au-Prince essentially being shut off from the rest of the country, Port-au-Prince is no longer an option. And outside of Cap-Haïtien, that's really I know there's some other seaports, but in terms of big, heavy hitting seaports, it really was Port-au-Prince, and then Cape-Haïtien has a pretty good sized port. But so I'd say a lot of the stuff that we're taking in, air is the only option. So again, misconceptions, like we are very different from your for-profit cargo carriers.
And on top of that, we're also working hand in hand with these mission partners.
Yeah.
You're not just going there to unload. Like, you are building relationships with these people.
100%.
And we do trips. We work with them. Like, it's not just a logistical drop off and then we're moving on. Like, this is not just a person. It's not a number. That's family to us.
100%. Yeah. I've got very good friendships with a lot of people in country that I've developed over the years. And, it's funny, sometimes they'll WhatsApp me or send me it's like, because a lot of people have got my number over the years. It's like, oh no, you got to ask Bruce. You got to, like trying to redirect that, but sometimes, it can be like, but I have to remember, it's like, that's because of relationship. Like, I'm honored that I get to be a critical piece that stands in the gap for them. Because again, they're down there. It's like, they can't just order it up on Amazon. It's there the next day. They can't just go down to Walmart or, Advance Auto or, whatever it might be. They can't go down to the local pharmacy or drugstore. It's like, we're it. And so I think anytime I get, tired or weary and well-doing, I have to remember that, as difficult as any one of my days might be, as it relates to what I'm doing here, they live it. They're there, so you talk about commitment, mine pales in comparison. So I'm just trying to follow in the stead of some of those saints that have just been so diligent to, carry out the calling and the mission down there.
Let's talk a little bit about the state of Haiti. I think a lot of people don't really truly understand the severity of the situation. And with you being down there so often as you are, can you elaborate what exactly is happening in Haiti?
Yeah. So Haiti is definitely very much, I think, a state on the verge of collapse, and they have been for a while. But it's one of those things, and I think any of our missionaries that are watching this, they probably know better than I do exactly what I'm about to say. But it's like every time something happens, whether it's a disaster or, the last several years, it's been the gang violence and the political instability, or a lot of times just the lack thereof. I hate to say that a corrupt leader is better than no leader at all, but right now you're kind of seeing that. People are frustrated with the previous regime. The previous president that was assassinated a few years ago now. But I'll say this: at least it was leadership. Power loves a vacuum, and just with that vacuum and leadership, the gangs have just really risen up and just taken advantage over the last 2-3 years in particular. And unfortunately, excuse me.
No, take your time. I feel like I want people to understand, you don't just deliver supplies. You are delivering supplies in an area that is truly unsafe.
Yeah, I would say that we temper every flight with intel on the ground. And so our missionaries, our partners, they are the best possible intel because they live it. They're right there. And so if an area is getting particularly hot, or if there's a particular movement that's happening in a particular region, typically they're the first to tell us, like, hey, this is not a good week. Just kind of hang out. And we've gotten that call, from a lot of times. And a lot of times it's not just one missionary. It's like we have several head people at each location, co-op leaders that are kind of our point people. But we'll get multiple calls sometimes from a particular co-op or a particular region, like, hey, things are not good here right now. Just like, maybe skip us this week. And so we're always listening to that. But again, going back to, talking about us flying into unsafe areas, I think, well, Haiti, as a whole is very unstable right now politically and in terms of safety. The areas that we fly into are relatively stable. And like I said, if they're not, typically we're finding out relatively quickly. And if we have to scrub a flight or skip a stop, we will. And there have been times to where I've been in country and I've gotten I've had a co-op. Literally one time I had one engine fired up and I was getting ready to start the other one, and I had our co-op leader in Lakai came running out. He was on the phone with Alan, and Alan gotten a call from some of the individuals in Port-au-Prince that, like, hey, there's gunshots happening right outside the airport right now. They're getting ready to close the airport. Like, don't. And that was the next stop in the line. It's like, do not go. Oh, wow. And so then, like, on the fly, it's like, okay, well, all right, I need somebody to call Customs, tell them to come back to the airport, because a lot of times at the time, Customs, they'd leave, 2 or 3 o'clock. Like, once the afternoon, they just leave early, and there's nobody there. It's a ghost town. It's like, hey, call Customs, get them back to the airport. Like, we can't go to port. And that's happened a number of times over the years. And so, like I said, super thankful for good intel on the ground, keeping us safe. But at the end of the day, it's risky. And, my wife probably doesn't ask the questions that she should ask all times. And it's probably better that way. And I think she knows and trusts in the Lord's sovereignty as I do, and knows that, I'm never going to make a foolish decision, certainly not flippantly and certainly not intentionally. Because it's not just me. It's, it's the equipment, it's Agape, it's our missionaries, it's the guy in the other seat. So obviously there's a lot of factors. You always want to think through safety. But yeah. No, when you fly into Haiti, there's always some aspect of risk. There's just no two ways about it.
Do you, and this is going to be asked for you to have some favoritism, is there a certain location you just love flying into?
Each location is unique.
You're giving
different.
Me that PC answer, aren't you?
Yeah. No, I know, because I legitimately, I have good friends in every. I love it. I do. I have very good friends in every location that we serve. In the Dominican, people that I've spent countless nights with over the years, on our overnight legs, that I have very good relationships with, and I love them dearly. I would say in terms of volume of relationships and friends, probably the most are in Lakai. And I think that's just because that's our biggest co-op by far. But even like, in Bombardopolis, it's a challenging little airstrip, and I have some dear friends there that serve. And so, each location has its own unique twists and turns, and but like I said, relationships in every location. And for me, that's what it's about. It's not about doing beautiful Caribbean flying, and it's not about just checking a box and doing my good deed for the day. It's about relationship, my relationship with the Lord and what He's called me to, and then my relationship with individuals on the ground down there. And over the years, like I said, I've developed a lot of them. And so for me, when I see a box going in, or I see a request come through via email, it's not just one more request, one more unknown. I don't know everybody. There's a ton of our missionaries I don't know. I've never met them, and it is just a name. It's not just a name, but there's a whole lot more that I have developed, good relationships with and friendships with over the years. And so when I see that box, or when I see that request come through, it's like, oh, so-and-so needs this. And so for me, that takes a whole nother level of, it's like, I'm not just doing a job. I'm like, hey, my buddy needs me. They need what I have the ability to fly to them. And so that just adds a whole nother layer of calling to it, I think.
No, I love hearing that. So we're going to kind of wrap this up a little bit. For those who are listening or watching, like, they feel inspired to get involved, what would be the best steps for them to take?
Again, we are hiring.
This is where I meant to plug this in, so that's why I did it.
Yeah, but obviously not everybody's a pilot or a mechanic, or ideally a combination thereof. I would say for the average layperson, if you're just getting involved, finding out who Agape is, or just missions in general, a lot of times I hear people say, it's like, I want to get involved, but I just don't hear God's calling on my life, like how I can get involved. I would say the worst thing you can do is nothing at all. I would say certainly, give financially, and there obviously, I would petition, you're watching an Agape podcast. So definitely Agape, definitely. I mean, we are heavily driven by donations, heavily. Without donations, we don't keep the doors open. And so if you're not sure how to get plugged in, I would say that's one thing right off the bat is give. However, pray and whatever you feel led to give, give. Ideally on a monthly basis. Monthly donors are the best donors in the sense that it's predictability. It helps us to budget and plan when we see, income versus expense. One times are always great, and obviously we'll never shy away from any of that. But yeah, get involved in a monthly giving rotation. And I do myself. So I know I feel like some people are just like, oh, well, you're in missions, you're a missionary. It's like, it's like, I give all over the place. So I don't say it to my own horn. It's just like, I'm not just calling people out to do something that I don't do or I'm not willing to do. So I'd say that if you don't know how else, I would say start by giving. Beyond that, continue to pray, go on a missions trip. For me, I initially, when I was in high school, like I said, I had no idea that I'd be called to full-time vocational ministry. But I started going on mission trips, and God just really just blew me away and opened up my exposure, in my case, to Haiti. But it doesn't have to be Haiti. Go wherever wherever you feel God calling you to. And that could be anywhere across the globe. The Great Commission is global. So wherever you feel God calling you to go and serve, and in whatever capacity, I would say do it. But that would be the first I would say is, unless you're a pilot and mechanic and you feel inclined to go to our website and see the job descriptions, and then I would say that's a great way to get involved. But outside of that, I would say, give financially, and then go. Get involved in a missions trip through your local church and get out there and see the world and serve the Lord.
Is there any stories you'd love to tell that you think would be kind of, a little drawing to people?
As in drawing to a pilot or a pilot mechanic that wants to come.
A little bit. Tell them like, hey, like this happened. This could happen. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like to give you a free rein right here.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Again, I'll just use the word relationship. I can't tell you how much I'm relationship driven, and people know me. I'm an introvert by nature. So I think people see me and I'm like, go, go, go. And it's like, oh, Greg, he's a taskmaster. And he's just like, get after it, get it done. But at the end of the day, the reason I'm so driven and that I am so go, go, go a lot of times, it's because of the relationships that are relying on what we're bringing to them. And so at the end of the day, I would say there's nothing more gratifying or fulfilling than fulfilling God's call in your life to be a part of the Great Commission. Because there's so many different aspects to that. When I was called, I was like, well, I'm not an eloquent speaker or a preacher. I'm not gifted in those ways. I haven't been to seminary. What can I bring to the table that the Lord can use in that Great Commission process? And so I would say, there's nothing more gratifying than knowing that you're plugged in where you need to be and being able to serve. And like I said, relationship is a huge part of that, my relationship to the Lord, but then the relationships I've developed. And I would say that, if you were a prospective pilot or pilot mechanic that wanted to get involved, vocationally, I would say that there's no greater reward than being able to go and serve in that way and know that you had a very tangible, direct impact on not only that family's life, but the Haitians that they're serving, or Dominicans, or Bahamians, or Cubans. We'd like to get more involved in Cuba as regulations allow. Or even Honduras. We've done case by case teams into Honduras. So, but point being that you are having a very real impact on the lives of thousands of people. And for me, I can't think of a greater legacy that I would want to leave, because at the end of the day, I'm going to die one day and I'm going to rot in the ground. At least my body is. But I'd like to know that I'm leaving a legacy in which I'm playing a part in other people's lives far beyond, the life that I'm breathing right now. And so that's going to carry, and echo into eternity. And I know for me, being in aviation, I can't think of a better way to do it.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining us and telling your stories. Sometimes I just get lost hearing him just telling stories about what he does, and then rag on him for being an OSU fan. You know,
Go Bucks.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's funny, when I first moved down here, we got the Buccaneers, and there's a lot of Ohio State transplants down here, and so obviously being a born and bred Buckeye and passionate Ohio State fan, I'd go to restaurants and TV would be on, and it's like, it's like, it's weird. It's a Sunday, but everybody's saying "Go Bucks." It's like, and so I would it didn't occur to me, because I'm not a huge NFL fan.
Yeah.
I follow a little, like a fringe follower, but big college ball fan, and so it's like, all right, go Bucks. I don't know why we're yelling that on a Sunday, but yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, again, you mentioned the Honduras trip. Next week, we're going to be actually sitting down with Paul Feit, so we're going to hear about the Honduras trip a lot. So
that'll be awesome. Paul's such a good guy.
He is. So tune in then, guys. Until then, God bless, and see you next week.